Thank you all for being here. My name is Aaron McCarter, Aviation Accident Investigator with the National Transportation Safety Board, based out of Washington, D.C., Eastern Region Field Investigator. I'm joined by Justin Coe, another aviation accident investigator who's down at the accident site as we speak, conducting oversight. I'd like to thank the Pennsylvania State Police, the Cumberland-County Fire Rescue and Sheriff's Department. I don't say this often, but the NTSB has been given outstanding, if not unprecedented support on this accident site. I can't thank you guys enough for what you all have done. We have been given all tools, equipment, time, lights, everything we need to conduct a thorough on-site investigation, especially given the difficult circumstances and the weather that's been rolling through today. So I thank you all very much. I was dispatched yesterday about 7:30 p.m. local time to Carlisle Airport, which is November 9-4. November 9-4 is the airport identifier, Carlisle Airport in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. I received a phone call that we had a mid-air collision at the time, the details of which were unknown. We dispatched to the site up here and arrived first thing this morning. What we had understood at the time is that a private aircraft, a general aviation aircraft, a Cessna 150, was on approach into the airport, on approach to the runway, behind a Bell 407 state police helicopter with two pilots on board, and there was a collision that took place. Now, many of you guys have all seen the videos that have turned up online. It's very dramatic, that shows the collision. So we see the outcome, but we want to understand why it happened. So we are looking at three things. We're looking at the human being, the man, the machine, the environment. The human being, the pilot. The pilots of both the helicopter and the pilots of the Cessna 150. Their training, their qualification, how many hours they have in their particular aircraft or in the particular helicopter. License, ratings, and certificates. We understand that the Cessna 150 pilot was a certified flight instructor. And we also understand that the pilots of the helicopter were on a training mission. There was an instructor pilot and a pilot receiving instruction at the time of the collision. The collision happened at 18:52, that's 6:52 p.m. local time. I will be joined by my co-workers at the NTSB, along with the Federal Aviation Administration, who has been on scene, Textron, the manufacturer of the Cessna, Bell Helicopter Company, and Rolls-Royce. We will all be here conducting a thorough investigation over the next several days. The first thing we're going to do in the next 24 hours, however, is due to the circumstances, the weather, and the disposition of the wreckage, and also the fact that this is an operating airport, we have conducted our on-scene portion already, taken lots of photographs. We're trying to take that wreckage, remove it from the wreckage site, and take it off to the side where we will transport it to Clayton, Delaware tomorrow morning. Now in Clayton, Delaware, there's an aircraft facility that specializes in aircraft and accident recovery. It will allow us to do a more thorough investigation under more controlled circumstances where we're out of the basically the weather and the environment. So the machine of the man and machine and the environment is we are looking at the technical aspects of both vehicles, the number of hours, cycles, the engineering aspects, if there was anything that could have been causal to the accident, and of course the environment consisting of the weather, air traffic control. I'm having a weather study done as we speak. From what I understand, the weather was very nice yesterday, so I don't anticipate that weather was a factor, but I would be getting ahead of myself at this time. I'm going to leave that to the weather experts to tell us what was going on. Air traffic control, I worked with the air traffic control specialist last night to get NTSB data, flight track data, flight profile data for both the helicopter and the Cessna, so we can determine what actually happened, what brought those two vehicles together in such a catastrophic way. I don't want to take away from the fact that we do have a deceased pilot, and our thoughts and prayers go out to the family and the friends of the deceased pilot. At the same time, we have a good news story. The two pilots of the helicopter have survived, not only survived with serious injuries and are recovering very nicely. So I do want to mention that there's a good aspect to this accident, whereas it could have been more tragic on so many more levels. So with that being said, I will answer any questions you may have for me.
How much were you able to recover from the Cessna, and is there anything apparent from what you've been able to see in the wreckage that could indicate something?
There's nothing apparent right now, but we do have a solid witness statement saying that the pilot was working on his aircraft yesterday. The pilot's airplane was based here at Carlisle Airport. He's a local pilot. The aircraft has a parking spot down here. We do have witnesses that state that he was working on his aircraft. He was conducting maintenance on it. I'm not saying the maintenance had anything to do with it. That was just one of the factors. And then the pilot flew down south for a few hours to conduct some training. We don't know the details about that yet. And then he returned to Carlisle yesterday early evening. Okay, but in terms of the wreckage, there's no clues that we have right now, nothing that stands out. But again, we've just been on the scene today for about 12 hours, so we'll know a lot more tomorrow and on the following days.
Sir, when you said the pilot was working on his aircraft yesterday, that would have been before he flew it yesterday.
Yes, so you're asking, yes, you're restating the fact that the pilot was working on conducting maintenance on his aircraft yesterday? Yes, he was, and that was before he flew the aircraft. But again, let's not hypothesize. That could have been anything, but it is factual. He was working on his airplane.
Yeah, can you put that in context? Would that be routine? Like, do pilots always do some maintenance before they fly?
That would be a hypothesis right now. I mean, it's very routine to conduct your own maintenance based on your qualifications, but right now we're getting too into the weeds about what he was working on. After we look at his maintenance records and do further interviews, we'll hopefully have a better idea of the kind of maintenance he was doing on the aircraft.
The flight path that the plane took of circling around the airport, going downwind and then coming down the runway, was that the proper flight path for going into this runway?
The flight path was unusual, but again, it's a non-controlled airport, and you know they were in communication with each other. But we are looking at the flight profile. We are looking at why the aircraft came in that direction. The helicopter came in and did a normal approach. It did what's called a hover taxi. All right, so a helicopter will come in, get in ground effect, and hover, and proceed to move forward, 3 to 5 to 10 feet above the ground. And then when he comes off the runway, that's when the Cessna came in, straight and level, suddenly increased its pitch, severe nose up, did a left turn, leveled off again, and then flew into the back of the helicopter. So, right now we don't know the details about why the pilot was flying in that pattern altitude or in that manner, but we are going to find out.
How long was the helicopter hovering for when it got hit?
I don't know at this time.
Is it typical for a helicopter to be hovering that close to a runway?
Yes, the helicopter. Yes, he is asking if it's typical for a helicopter to come in that close and hover, to a runway. Yes, the helicopter did a normal approach, and instead of doing an approach and landing, it did an approach and hover maneuver where it's hovering. It's basically taxiing forward, but in a hover. Okay, so it hadn't departed the runway surface. It was still above the runway surface when it was hit. But it's a very normal maneuver, especially for a training maneuver, to do what's called a hover taxi.
There's no control tower at this airport, which is common among many small airports. They go by radio frequency. Is that a challenge, or is
You're asking if there was any, the fact that there was no control tower, that they do normal communication? No, it's not a challenge. For smaller airports, it's very common to use the CTAF, Common Traffic Advisory Frequency. It's called CTAF, where you're communicating your intentions to the local traffic so you can make them aware of what you're planning on doing, and you can communicate with each other. Very normal, very standard practice.
Could you briefly describe the flight path that the aircraft took?
Say again, please.
Could you briefly describe their flight path?
I'm not going to describe the flight path yet because I want to look at the air traffic control data. We have to be careful with ADSB data. ADSB data is preliminary in nature until I get the official flight profile from our air traffic control specialist. He's supposed to send that to me today. I'll review it when I leave the scene tonight, and then I'll have a better idea tomorrow. So I'm not going to get into the description of the flight profile right now.
Again, Delaware. Why are you relocating it for a better?
We're taking the aircraft, both the aircraft, down to Delaware because there's a facility down there that specializes. As a matter of fact, the team is here right now. They specialize in aircraft recovery, especially involved in plane crashes. There's a facility down in Clayton, Delaware that has a hangar. They have all the tools and equipment necessary, and it's secured. We want a secured private location where we could do a thorough examination with myself, Textron, Bell Helicopter, and Rolls-Royce. So it's an ideal environment to do that. And they specialize this. I go to Clayton, Delaware on a regular basis.
And you said the pilot of the Cessna, he was a certified flight instructor as well?
The pilot of the Cessna was a certified flight instructor, yes.
And then the one trooper was training the other?
Yes, a flight instructor was training the other pilot. I don't know the reasons for the training, but he was there was a pilot under instruction, and then there was a training pilot, an instructor pilot.
And you have not said or cannot say at this time which pilot was?
No, I can't. It's too early in the investigation to determine that.
In your investigation, do you think the Cessna pilot knew a helicopter was here?
Excuse me, do I think the Cessna pilot knew the helicopter was hovering? I do believe we have strong evidence that the Cessna pilot was made aware of the helicopter hovering in the area, making the approach. We do know that much.
Do you think it's possible that he didn't see the helicopter with the that it was under the nose of the plane?
That would be hypothesis. I can't determine whether or not his visual acuity or whether or not the helicopter was blocked from view. I can't tell you that. I'll come back to you for your next question. You had a question? Excuse me, I have no information at all to tell me either pilot of either vehicle was at fault. We are very early in the investigation to determine that.
Can you just go back to something you said earlier? They did communicate with each other then.
Communication was established between the flight crews, yes.
And that would be typical for an airport.
That would be typical for an airport. Yeah, because you have to, you communicate through the CTAF, your intentions, your landing, your taking off, to other aircraft in the area, so you're made aware of where you are in relation to other airplanes. We know the communication was established and it took place. That's as much as I can tell you right now. I can't go into the detail of what was said, but that's something we're going to get into. I have time for 2 more questions.
Can I just clarify that? You say we know that communication was established and it took place. Was that, I'm not familiar with the acronym you used, but was that pilot to pilot, or was
CTAF is pilot to, it's the Common Traffic Advisory Frequency. I'm not going to get into the weeds on what that is. You can actually look that up online or go to the FAA.gov website. But it's a Common Traffic Advisory Frequency with a set code, radio code that you put in where you can communicate to the pilots in the area. It's very common. It's very, very common for airports. Thousands and thousands of airports have this, and it's the primary means of communication to other traffic in the area. You had a question?
Yes, the ADSB data for the plane on the tracking field ended right before it came towards the runway. Why did it end there? Is that part of the investigation?
Again, we have to be careful using preliminary ADSB data. The data that you see when you plug in your computer and look at ADSB or FlightAware or FlightTrack, that data is preliminary in scope. I'm looking for the actual formalized FAA certified ADSB data, so I can make sure that any breaks or anything like that, so I can totally determine what the actual flight track was. So I'm sorry I can't get any further into the details about that, but what I'm looking at is the actual air traffic data of ADSB nature. You had a question?
That video that you referenced earlier, is that something that would be released at some point in the investigation?
The video is released now to the general public. It's out on YouTube and social media, so there's nothing I can do about that. However, when I get official video from a hard drive, a stick that we have down there, that will be a part of the investigation, and that will be released when we put the docket out. Now, the process is this. In the next 10 to 15 days, I'll have a preliminary report accomplished. It's going to have the factual information that we've learned on scene so far. Okay? And 9 to 12 months, the factual report will come out. Now, the factual report is going to have all the information collated that we gathered during the entire course of the investigation. And within 18 months, the final report, along with the probable cause, will be out, and the probable cause is signed off by the board members of the NTSB. One more question?
I have one.
Yes.
This is a follow-up. I think last night I thought that they indicated that the helicopter was hovering off to the side of the runway, but I thought I heard you say that their hover taxi they were actually aligned with the runway when this collision occurred?
The-
Can you explain?
Okay, you're asking about what you heard and saw last night versus what I just said. Okay, the helicopter was on approach. It did a normal approach to the runway, straight down the runway center line. When it got midway down, it did what's called a hover taxi, and it started hovering down the runway, and it started to go off to the side. That's when the collision happened. It happened right on the side of the runway. The reasons which I do not know. I don't know what the pilots were doing at the time or if they were planning on turning around. That's all hypothesis. All I can tell you is what we saw in the video. All right, thank you all very much.